This isn't the Wild West you saw in movies. This is the version they didn't want you to know. You're standing outside a mud brick hut in the sweltering outskirts of Tupiza, Bolivia. The sun is high, but there's a strange cold in your chest. You hear flies buzzing louder than they should. Somewhere behind you, a dog whimpers. In front of you, a wooden door hangs crooked on rusted hinges. Inside, if the stories are true, lies the body of one of the most notorious outlaws the American West ever produced. But the face is gone, blown clean off. No one saw it clearly, and no one ever proved it was really him. The man they say died in that shack? The Sundance Kid. But between you and me, you'll soon start to wonder whether he ever died at all. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and what time you're watching this. I love seeing where these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck into the shade, hand resting near the pistol on your hip, not out of fear, but habit. The Bolivian authorities say 2 American bandits died here in 1908 after a botched payroll robbery and a desperate shootout. And the US newspapers swallowed the story whole, as if they'd been waiting for it. Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, dead. The headline wrote itself. But something's off. The corpses were buried in unmarked graves. No photos, no fingerprints. One face was reportedly destroyed beyond recognition, likely by suicide. The soldiers said. The other was already decaying in the heat. For 2 men who made lawmen and newspapers their unwilling pen pals for years. This ending feels too tidy. You lean against a stone wall and close your eyes, tracing the journey backward, all the way to when the man now known as Sundance was just another boy with dusty boots and no real name. Even that is a puzzle. Historians still argue whether the Sundance Kid was really born Harry Longabaugh in Montclair, Pennsylvania, or if that name was just the first of many masks. What we do know, records from the 1800s were flimsy, especially for people who didn't want to be found. The earliest confirmed arrest for a Harry Longabaugh happened in 1887. He was about 20, caught stealing a horse, saddle, and revolver from a ranch near Sundance, Wyoming, and that's where the nickname stuck. Sundance, clean, sharp, just threatening enough. He did 18 months in the Sundance jail. A humble little wooden box surrounded by more prairie dogs than people. But something changed inside him. He didn't come out a petty thief. He came out a student of crime. There's no photograph of him from this time. But if you were there, you'd likely notice the eyes first. Calm, unreadable. A young man who understood that silence could be more dangerous than swagger. He wasn't a drunk. He wasn't loud. He didn't brag like most dime novel villains. He just observed. One quiet jailbird, one stolen horse, and a legend was born. Now, let's pause here for a moment of historical levity. A weird tidbit. Back in the late 1800s, outlaws sometimes sent thank you letters to newspapers that wrote flattering pieces about them. Some even corrected typos. Sundance never did that. He didn't care to be famous. He cared to be invisible. And that, oddly enough, might have made him immortal. Because in the dusty lineup of Wild West criminals, Sundance wasn't the showman. That was Butch Cassidy, the smiling, scheming train robber who could talk a nun into sin. Butch had charisma. Butch had a dream. Build a gang. Steal from banks. Flee to South America. And maybe one day buy a quiet little ranch where no one knew your name. Sundance? He had precision. He had nerve. And, as you'll soon see, he had a remarkable ability to vanish just before things got messy. You're still standing outside that hut. Still hearing the flies. Still wondering why no one ever tested the bones. In 1991, a team of forensic anthropologists exhumed the bodies from that unmarked grave in San Vicente Cemetery. You can practically feel the dry Bolivian wind cutting through your jacket as they dust off cracked bones. DNA tests were run. The result? No match. Not Butch. Not Sundance. Just two men who happened to be American. Who happened to die violently. Who happened to fit the story too perfectly. Now you're probably thinking, if it wasn't him, where did he go? We'll get to that. But for now, hold on to this. The Sundance Kid may be the only outlaw in American history who got to attend his own funeral, and then disappear again. You press your boots into the cracked earth, eyes still on that ghost town horizon, but your mind travels back further. Before the Bolivian shootout, before Patagonia ranches, even before train robberies and frontier romances, there was just a boy. And the strange thing is, we don't really know who he was. The man we think of as Sundance, Harry Alonzo Longabaugh, was supposedly born in Montclair, Pennsylvania, sometime in 1867. But the records? They're paper thin, a name on a census. A possible family tied to a lumberman. That's about it. No birth certificate, no school records, no early portraits. It's like someone left his origin story half finished. So you hop a train, just for a moment, back to post-Civil War America. It's industrializing fast. Families are moving west. Railroads are stretching like veins across the continent. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a quiet, wiry boy with quick hands and quicker eyes is watching it unfold. He's not loud, not restless, but he notices things. Some say he grew up in a working-class family. Others believe he may have been an orphan drifting from relative to relative. Historians still argue whether the real Longabaugh spent his teenage years in Pennsylvania, Illinois, or Nebraska. What's certain is that by the time he's in his late teens, he's already drifting westward. And that's where everything starts to crackle. You ride into the Dakota Territory. Late 1880s. The land's rough. Dust stings your eyes. And cowhands fill the saloons with half-true tales. One of them mentions a horse thief who got caught trying to outrun a rancher's posse. That would be young Harry, or whoever he really was. Caught with a stolen saddle, revolver, and horse. He's sentenced to 18 months in the Sundance jail. That's it. That's the spark. You sit across from him in the cell. He's thin, sunburned, but unafraid. You ask if he regrets anything. He doesn't answer. Just studies you, like he's already memorizing your face. And that's what separates him. Not just the silence, but the strategy behind it. He isn't a hot-headed gunslinger like Wild Bill or a drunk gambler like Doc Holliday. He's surgical, thoughtful, the kind of man who would kill only if he had to, and then vanish without saying a word. That's why the name Sundance stuck. And funny enough, while he served his sentence, the rest of the West was beginning to celebrate lawlessness. Jesse James had been shot in the back just 5 years earlier. Billy the Kid was long dead. But the country had an appetite for outlaws. People bought dime novels with blood-soaked covers. Outlaws weren't criminals, they were celebrities. So when Longabaugh walked out of that cell in 1889, he wasn't just free, he was marketable. Now, here's the quirky part. A few years later, a woman named Annie Oakley would tour the country with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, romanticizing gunfights and prairie justice. But at the same time, Harry Longabaugh was out there robbing real trains, hiding in real canyons, and keeping his name out of the papers. Talk about irony. You hop back into your boots, now worn at the edges, and follow him as he drifts through Colorado, Utah, maybe even down into Mexico. There are sightings, but they're vague. What's clear is that he meets men with bigger dreams, and even more dangerous ones. Men like Butch Cassidy. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. Let's stay here a bit longer. In the transition. In the space between just another outlaw and legend. Because this part of the story is often skipped. There's a report, just one, that suggests young Sundance may have worked on a ranch for a time. He liked horses, wasn't bad with a rope. But that life? It bored him. Too slow, too honest, too visible. He wasn't built for towns. He was built for trails. Now, remember that funny bit I mentioned? According to some fringe accounts, Sundance once tried to join a traveling vaudeville show after his release. The troupe rejected him, said he was too quiet, not flashy enough. Can you imagine? One of the deadliest men in the West being told he didn't have stage presence? You smile, because if you've learned anything so far, it's that Sundance didn't need flash. He needed shadows. He lived in the margins, operated on the outskirts of every map. He wasn't loud because loud people got shot. He didn't dress fancy because fancy people got noticed. He didn't monologue. He whispered and then disappeared. And that's what makes him dangerous. That's what makes him unforgettable. And maybe, just maybe, that's what allowed him to survive. Because while history declared him dead in 1908, the trail you're following, it's only just beginning. You ride alongside a younger Sundance now, only he's not famous yet. He's still hairy, still half shadow, but his crimes are getting bolder. You watch as he joins up with drifting outlaws across Utah and Wyoming. At first, it's petty theft, livestock, saddles, the occasional poker game gone wrong. But soon, he graduates, his targets grow heavier, guarded by iron and men. You crouch in the sagebrush as Sundance and a small crew stop a stagecoach outside Castle Gate. They don't fire a shot. The guards, young and outmatched, throw down their weapons. The bandits vanish with bags of cash, like ghosts on horseback. Mainstream historians agree that Sundance was already a sharpshooter by the early 1890s. He didn't brag, didn't write letters to the papers like Jesse James. But lawmen feared him. He had a reputation for hitting what he aimed at, and never leaving a witness. Historians still argue whether Sundance's earliest robberies were solo missions or small-time gang work. But the fact remains, his name begins appearing on wanted posters across multiple states. Always paired with a question mark. Harry Longabaugh, aka Sundance Kid? No photo, no fingerprints, just rumors and rough sketches. Now here's the twist. In 1892, a train near Malta, Montana, is hit hard. Two men, masked, silent, blow the safe. Escape with $20. The rail company suspects Sundance. But no one can prove it. No one ever will. This becomes a pattern. A shadow of blame follows him across the West. But he's always one step ahead. Always gone before dawn. And here's a quirky fact. Some folks say Sundance once paid for a full steak dinner right after a heist. Left a tip so big the waitress fainted. True or not, the tale spread fast. He wasn't a brute. He was professional. And more than anything, he refused to die in some no-name town with a bullet in his back. You're in a dimly lit saloon in the mining town of Telluride, Colorado. The air tastes like whiskey and tobacco. And somewhere behind you, a piano is trying and failing to stay in tune. You feel the mood shift as two men sit quietly at a table in the corner. One of them smiles too much. The other doesn't smile at all. That's Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, though no one calls them that out loud yet. You lean a little closer, pretending to sip your drink, trying to catch their voices over the noise. The conversation is quiet, deliberate. Butch is doing most of the talking. He's calm, persuasive, like a preacher selling salvation with a dash of dynamite. Sundance? He nods once, says almost nothing, but his hand never leaves the edge of the table. You can tell he's already calculating how fast he could draw, how many exits there are, what angle the mirror behind the bar gives him. This is the moment the West changes forever. Butch isn't asking Sundance to join just any gang. He's building a crew with rules, hierarchy, a code. They won't just rob, they'll do it smart, surgical, clean. You blink, and suddenly, you're riding with them. They're calling themselves the Wild Bunch now. And the heists? They're coordinated, precise. You help dig up stashes. Ride ahead to scout train schedules. Listen to Butch crack jokes while Sundance studies maps with cold intensity. Historians still argue whether Butch and Sundance were truly equals in leadership or if Sundance simply followed. But based on the silence that surrounds him, it's clear, he was no one's sidekick. And here's a curious tidbit. Sundance reportedly hated robbing banks. Said trains were easier, faster, and didn't involve hostages crying in his face. Moral code or just efficiency? That part, you're never quite sure. But the job that sealed their partnership came in June of 1899. You crouch behind a ridge in Wilcox, Wyoming. It's still dark. Frogs croak nearby. A train whistle moans in the distance. Boom! The express car explodes in a fiery spray. Sparks fill the sky like outlaw fireworks. And within minutes, the gang vanishes into the hills with over $50. What they don't realize is that this job paints a giant target on their backs. The Pinkerton Detective Agency, America's private army of manhunters, is now fully activated. But for now, as you ride off into the rising sun, it feels like nothing can touch them. And if you're wondering how someone like Sundance could keep pulling this off, well, here's something few know. He practiced out in the desert for hours, drawing, firing, reloading, moving. Some say he could shoot the ash off a cigarette at 30 feet. Others say he once hit a thrown coin 4 times before it landed. You don't know what's real, but you know he's dangerous. And you know this partnership? It's only getting started. You grip the rail of the passenger car as the wheels rumble beneath your feet. The desert blurs past in streaks of beige and copper. Then, without warning, the train jerks hard. A hiss of steam, a scream. You lurch forward as everything stops. Welcome to another Wild Bunch heist. You crawl onto the roof to get a better look. Down below, the express car has been decoupled. There's shouting, then a sharp crack of dynamite. The doors fly open like paper. And standing in the swirling dust, gun steady, jaw set, is Sundance. He moves like he's done this before. Because he has. Over and over again. This isn't chaos. It's choreography. Sundance's role? Enforcer. Point man. The one who ensures nobody gets brave. But even now, you notice, he doesn't shoot unless someone moves first. And most folks? They freeze the second they meet his eyes. These weren't just robberies. They were performances, rehearsed to the second. Butch handled the charm and the planning. Sundance handled the silence. Historians still argue whether Sundance ever truly enjoyed the outlaw life, or if he saw it as a necessary evil. A path chosen because the straight road closed long ago. What's certain is, he never hesitated. The gang starts communicating by telegrams in code. You see one, briefly, scribbled notes about when to hit a train, where to stash the loot, and when to vanish for 6 months. Dynamite becomes their signature. The Union Pacific even starts reinforcing safes with extra iron because of the Wild Bunch. Doesn't help. The gang always finds a workaround. There's something oddly modern about it. Like you're watching the first true criminal syndicate. And Sundance? He's the face no one ever sees clearly. Now, let's sprinkle in a fun little detail. During one heist, the gang accidentally blows up the loot, money shredded and scattered for miles. The newspapers mock them. Butch laughs. Sundance? He just stares at the wreckage and mutters. Could have been worse. And he means it. You follow them to Robber's Roost next. A desert hideout so well hidden it doesn't even show up on maps. You ride for days through twisting canyons and dry riverbeds until suddenly, there it is. A secluded camp, horses tied, fire pit warm, fresh game cooking. It feels like a secret town built for ghosts. This is where the gang regroups, repairs, plans the next job. It's also where Sundance trains. You watch him draw on tin cans at 20 paces, barely missing a beat. He never brags, never explains, but you can tell, this man lives in the space between quiet and danger. It's around this time the law begins closing in. Pinkertons are sniffing around every rail town. Posters start appearing with rough sketches of the tall one with the cold eyes. Bounties climb, and for the first time, You sense a shift. Sundance is getting tired. Not of robbing, not of running, but of the pressure building like a thundercloud. You can see it in his posture. A little more rigid, a little more alert. Then one day, a message arrives. The Pinkertons know the names now. They know the faces. They're coming fast. And just like that, the gang begins to scatter. Some get caught. Some die in shootouts. But Sundance? He adapts. He stops sleeping in towns. Starts changing his look more often. You see him shave his mustache. Wear a preacher's coat. Even uses an accent once, badly. But effective. One final quirky tidbit. Sundance reportedly hated riding in the front of the group. Said it was a hero's position, and heroes always get shot first. So even when leading, he drifted just to the left or the rear, always watching. Never centering himself. You're learning the pattern now. Be fast. Be quiet. Don't be seen. And if you are seen, be someone else entirely. But despite everything, the walls are closing in. The Pinkertons won't stop. The money's getting harder to move. Every town seems to have a whisper of him. Sooner or later, something has to give. And that, dear listener, is when a woman enters the picture. But not just any woman. You're sitting across a cracked cafe table in New York City, of all places. Rain spatters softly on the window. The woman in front of you stirs her coffee once, twice, then locks eyes with you. She says her name is Etta Place. But just like everything else in Sundance's life, that's probably not true. Etta is elegant but not fancy. Educated but not boastful. The kind of woman who, if she held a gun to your head, would apologize for the inconvenience. And yes, she can shoot. Very well. In fact, you see her in photos. Always standing close to Sundance. Never behind him. A schoolteacher. Some say. A prostitute. Say others. A nurse. A spy. Historians still argue whether she was ever truly Etta Place at all, or if that was just another name borrowed for convenience. What's undeniable is her role in the next chapter of Sundance's life. She becomes his partner, not just in love, but in escape. You ride beside them on a ship bound for South America in early 1901. Yes, a steamship. Sundance, Butch, and Etta are trying something completely new, a clean break. A full reboot. They've robbed half the American West and now, as the walls close in, they're chasing freedom in the most ironic way possible, by going straight. Argentina, that's the dream. The three of them arrive in Buenos Aires and vanish like shadows in fog. You follow them inland, where they buy land in Patagonia, a remote ranch nestled among wind-lashed trees and jagged hills. You watch Sundance trade his revolver for a shovel. Butch chops wood with the casual swing of someone who's never worked a day in his life. Etta? She keeps records, pays bills, teaches the children of nearby farmers how to write. It's peaceful. For a while. And here's your quirky tidbit. At one point, Sundance and Etta take a vacation to Chile. Dressed like wealthy tourists, the American embassy actually hosts them, no one realizing they're outlaws on the run. Somewhere in that visit, they even dine at a governor's house. It's almost comedic, but that's the power of anonymity when you've erased your past. But you can feel it. Sundance is restless. He's playing the role of rancher. But the soil doesn't sit right under his nails. He checks the property lines too often. Keeps a rifle over the mantle. And when riders pass too slowly on the trail, he watches them like prey. He's not meant for peace. He's surviving it. And Etta? She sees it, too. One night you overhear them arguing, quietly but intensely. She wants a normal life. He wants to stay with her. But he can't silence the part of himself trained to listen for hoofbeats in the dark. Then comes the letter. Or the telegram. No one's sure how it reached them, but the effect is undeniable. Trouble. Back in Bolivia, an American payroll transport is making its way through mountain passes. Guarded, but not well. A tempting target. Butch sees an opportunity. Sundance hesitates. Etta? She begs them not to go. She loses. In mid-1906, She returns to the United States, alone. Never seen again. Some claim she died in a flu outbreak. Others say she remarried in Denver. One theory even places her in Paris as an art dealer. But in truth, she disappears as completely as Sundance once did. And now, you're back where we began. 2 American men, a Bolivian town, a shootout. But we're not there yet. You ride with Sundance and Budge through the Andes. The winds howl. The nights are freezing. They're older now, wearier, but no less dangerous. You pass ghost towns and mining camps. The last flickers of frontier lawlessness. Every man carries a gun. Every horse looks overworked. And every dollar comes with a price. The plan is simple. Hit the payroll transport. Split the take. Vanish forever. But of course, things don't go according to plan. The moon is low when you arrive at the mining camp near San Vicente. The mountains loom like silent sentries. And the wind carries the copper tang of dust and rusted tin. Sundance doesn't speak. He hasn't for hours. Neither does Budge. Their silence isn't awkward. It's the kind of silence forged by men who've run out of words but still trust each other to bleed the same direction. You tie the horses behind a corroded water tank. Your boots sinking into the soft earth. A faint glow leaks from the shack ahead. One of the last structures still standing in the dying Bolivian mining town. That's where they plan to rest. Just for the night. But something doesn't feel right. You can smell it. The job had gone wrong earlier that day. What was supposed to be a simple payroll ambush turned chaotic. A shootout with Bolivian soldiers. A panicked escape into the hills. And now they're bleeding. Budge has a slug in the shoulder. Sundance took one in the leg. They're wounded, tired, and trapped. Inside the shack, Budge collapses onto a rickety cot. Sundance checks the door, his revolver resting on his thigh like an old friend. You crouch near the window and peer out. Shadows move. Voices carry in the dark. The Bolivian army has found them. Still, no panic. Not from them. This isn't Sundance's first time being cornered. But here's the eerie part. Despite everything, despite the walls closing in, he looks peaceful. You notice it in the set of his jaw. The stillness of his breath. Like he's made peace with this ending. Or maybe he knows it won't be the ending everyone expects. Historians still argue whether the 2 men who died in that Bolivian hut were really Budge and Sundance. The official report says so. But the details? They're fuzzy, sloppy, convenient. At sunrise, the gunfire erupts. A short, brutal exchange. Then, silence. When the soldiers enter the shack, they find 2 bodies. One with a head wound. The other riddled with bullets. No identification. No photos. Just assumptions and relief. Now here's the quirky twist. A Bolivian officer reportedly claimed that neither man matched the descriptions they were given. Wrong height, wrong hair, but orders were orders. The official report declared them dead, and the US newspapers ran with it. End of story. Except, you're not convinced. And neither are a growing number of researchers, authors, and amateur sleuths. In the years that followed, rumors began to swirl. Sundance sightings in Chile. Sundance working as a ranch hand in Wyoming. Sundance visiting family under a different name. Even one account of him as an old man in San Antonio. Watching children play near the Alamo. A soft smile on his lips. But back to the shack for a moment. One final chilling detail. No autopsies were performed. The bodies were buried within hours. No dental records. No verification. Just 2 graves marked with stones, and a question mark that still echoes through history. You sit on the edge of one of those graves now. Fingers brushing the rough soil. You wonder if you're touching legend, or just the remnants of a clever misdirection. And you realize something. Sundance didn't fear death. He feared being known. Maybe that's why he vanished so well. You lean against a wooden post in the midday sun, flipping through a worn Pinkerton file. The pages are yellowed, brittle, and frustratingly vague. A few blurry photographs, some receipts, testimonies that contradict each other. But one pattern emerges over and over again. Whenever someone got close to Sundance, he disappeared. After San Vicente, the Pinkertons celebrated. On paper, the West's most wanted duo was gone. They closed files, redirected agents, declared victory. But you're beginning to understand, that's exactly what Sundance wanted. And strangely, a few within the agency seemed to suspect it too. A letter surfaces, written by a Pinkerton field agent in 1911. It suggests he spotted someone matching Sundance's description, not in South America, but in rural Montana. The man was older, limping slightly, polite, and, get this, traveling under the name Henry Place. Same initials, same silence. You look up from the file and realize something disturbing. The chase may have never truly ended. It just got quieter. But here's where things get suspicious. You visit old lawmen in Wyoming, ranchers in Colorado, a retired sheriff in New Mexico. One by one, they tell you stories that don't quite fit the official version. In each, there's a quiet stranger, keeps to himself, works hard, eyes too sharp to belong to a farmer, always leaves before anyone learns his last name. One account in particular grabs you. A barber in Cheyenne, Wyoming, recalls giving regular shaves to a man named Harry Place in the early 1920s. Said he was ex-military, had scars on his arms, didn't talk much, but once whispered something about never trusting a man who smiles too fast. The barber only realized years later that smileless man may have been Sundance. And the best part? The Pinkertons never reopened the case. Historians still argue whether this was due to genuine closure or quiet embarrassment. After all, what government agency wants to admit it buried the wrong body? But even stranger than the silence from the law was the silence from Sundance's former crew. Many of the Wild Bunch members were captured, killed, or gave interviews in their later years. But when asked about Sundance, they clammed up. It's like they had a pact, like they knew something, and refused to betray it. Now, let's veer briefly into the weird. A newspaper clipping from 1930 surfaces decades later. It mentions a quiet man found dead in a boarding house in Oregon. The name on the room registry? Charles Allen, but in his effects, they found old revolver parts, an 1890s coin belt, and a photograph of Etta Place. No family claimed the body. He was buried in a pauper's grave, and no one connected the dots. Until much, much later. And now for your quirky tidbit of the night. Some researchers believe Sundance might have worked as a security consultant for railroads in his later years. Imagine the irony. One of the greatest train robbers of all time, getting paid to protect the very cargo he once stole. It fits, doesn't it? That calculated mindset. The ability to anticipate moves. The aversion to fame. It's not hard to picture him. Older now. Watching trains from the shadows, not with greed, but with quiet satisfaction. You step away from the files. Your head spinning. It's becoming harder to believe that the man in that Bolivian grave was truly Sundance Kid. Too many holes. Too many sightings. Too many men named Harry, Henry, Charles, or Place, with the same haunted eyes. And the law? It never really tried again. Maybe they wanted the story to end. Maybe Sundance earned his ending. Or maybe, just maybe, he never stopped running. You wipe the sweat from your brow as the midday sun burns over a rolling, wind-swept valley. Patagonia stretches endlessly around you, untamed, silent, unforgiving. Somewhere out here, nestled in the foothills of the Andes, Sundance once tried to live like a man who had no past. You find what's left of the ranch. Broken fence posts, a few scattered stones, wind whistling through the remnants of a cabin's foundation. But you can still feel it. This place mattered. They called it Estancia La Leona, a working ranch purchased by Butch, Sundance, and Etta under the names James Ryan, Harry Place, and Ethel Place. The paperwork exists, still filed in dusty Argentinian archives. You can run your fingers over their fake signatures. And here's the haunting part. The handwriting matches known samples from the Wilcox heist. So much for clean breaks. You imagine Sundance out here, shovel in one hand, revolver never far from the other, mending fences, branding cattle, whispering English curses at stubborn horses. It's a strange picture. A man built for velocity, standing still. Locals at the time described them as quiet, polite, and oddly generous. The Americanos were good with animals and didn't pick fights. Sundance taught a few children how to read, but he never joined the town dances, never drank in the local saloons. He lived like someone preparing to leave at any moment. Historians still argue whether the ranch was ever meant to be permanent, or just a clever staging ground, a place to lay low, clean the guns, wait out the storm, and then, as always, the storm found them. In 1905, an American mining company operating in Bolivia was hit by a violent robbery. Two masked men, military-style efficiency, one injured, one called the other Sundance. Coincidence? The Pinkertons didn't think so. A letter was dispatched from their Denver office to the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires. The letter asked one very specific thing: monitor a Mr. Harry Place, believed to be residing in the Patagonian foothills. So the game was up. And here's your quirky tidbit, according to one Argentinian tax document. Sundance, under his alias, paid his ranch taxes early every year. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, but he made damn sure the land was always legal. You walk past the ruins of the corral, boots crunching on gravel. There's a strange peace here, the kind that hides inside wind-carved silence. You can almost see him, leaning against a fence post, watching the horizon, his mind half a world away. Etta left soon after the heat rose. Maybe it was a fight. Maybe it was the weight of a man always looking over his shoulder. Either way, she vanished. And Sundance? He went back to what he knew best, moving. There are reports of him and Butch heading north, into Bolivia, back into outlaw territory, not for the thrill, not for the money, but because the world wouldn't let them be anything else. One final job, one final score, one final mistake, and that's where the timelines diverge. Some say he died in a Bolivian shack in 1908. Some say he doubled back and returned to the US under yet another name. But here, standing in the wind at the edge of their forgotten ranch, you wonder if maybe, just maybe, he never left Patagonia at all. Because just down the hill, a local legend tells of an old man who lived alone until the 1940s. He didn't speak much, had piercing eyes, carried an American-made revolver on his hip and never told anyone his real name. When he died, no one claimed the body. No family, no friends, just a note in his cabin that read, "Don't dig, let the past rot." And that's the thing about Sundance Kid. He didn't want to be remembered. He wanted to be lost. You crouch beneath a low stone wall in the Bolivian mining town of Tupiza. Dust swirls in the dry wind, catching in your throat. Your pulse ticks louder than the rusted clock tower above. It's the evening of November 6th, 1908, and you're watching two weary men ride into town. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Or so the records claim. They check into a small boarding house under assumed names. Quiet, polite, they don't draw attention, but then again, they never did. The locals say one limps slightly, favors his left side, the other doesn't smile, not once. You follow them to dinner, potatoes and salted meat. No alcohol, few words. The innkeeper remembers they spoke Spanish well, but with heavy accents. American, definitely, not bandits, she says, courteous, paid in silver. The next day, a payroll convoy rolls through town, a mining company's cash, guarded by mules and a few men with rifles. Sundance and Butch strike, just like old times. But this time, something goes wrong. One guard resists. A shot is fired. Another. Chaos erupts in the narrow canyon pass. The stolen cash is recovered almost immediately. But the two Americans vanish into the hills. By nightfall, The Bolivian army has them surrounded in a small adobe hut near San Vicente. You crouch with them now. Inside that dusty room, 2 revolvers, little food, no hope of escape. Sundance is wounded. Again. The leg. He's pale but focused, laying against the wall with a rifle balanced across his knees. Butch reloads calmly. There's no fear here, only calculation. And then, the shots ring out. 2, maybe 3. No one knows who fired first. The soldiers storm the hut at dawn and find 2 bodies. One with a bullet wound to the temple. The other slumped beside him, blood soaking the dirt floor. The locals assume it was a murder-suicide, Butch ending it for them both. But here's where things unravel. The bodies are buried in simple graves. No autopsies, no photographs, no official identification, and more importantly, no Americans ever confirmed the corpses were those of Butch Cassidy or Sundance Kid. Historians still argue whether the Bolivian authorities even cared to verify. For them, 2 dead gringos meant closure. It was convenient, clean, an international headache wrapped up with a shovel and a sigh. But you dig deeper. Decades later, a forensic team exhumes the graves. DNA tests are performed. You wait, you hope, you imagine, for a brief moment, that science will solve the mystery. It doesn't. The DNA results are inconclusive. The bodies? Not a match to known Sundance family samples. Not even close. So, who died in that hut? A quirky twist here. One of the Bolivian soldiers claimed, years later, that the men in the hut were speaking broken Spanish with Chilean slang. Not American English. When asked why this detail never made it into the official report, he simply shrugged and said, "The gringos paid more attention. You climb the hill above San Vicente now. Wind whispering through sparse grass. The grave markers are weathered. Nearly gone. You place your hand on one. No inscription. No date. Just stone. You wonder, was this Sundance's end? Or a decoy? Because if anyone could fake his death and vanish forever, it was him." You step into a dimly lit archive in San Antonio, Texas. The air smells of old paper and lemon oil. A local historian, half retired, half forgotten, slides a faded manila folder across the desk. You open it slowly, heart tapping against your ribs. Inside, a single photograph. A man in his 60s. Gray stubbled, lean, wearing a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over intense eyes. The kind of face that doesn't invite questions. The kind of face you've seen sketched on wanted posters. The caption reads, "Henry Long, 1936. Retired rancher." You look closer. The cheekbones, the eyes, the posture. It's not a match, it's a shadow. A whisper, like someone remembering how Sundance used to hold his shoulders. And then there's the back of the photo. Scribbled in pencil, barely legible. Was he the one from Argentina? Now you're chasing ghosts across timelines. After San Vicente, rumors spread like wildfire. A man named Harry Long showed up in Utah. Another, calling himself Charles Allen, worked odd jobs in Oregon. Yet another, Enrique Largo, lived off the grid in Chile. Every time, the description changes slightly. Older, grayer, but always the same 3 traits. Quiet, skilled with a horse, and eyes that never blinked long. You follow one trail in particular, a 1940 census in Duchesne County, Utah. Lists A, Henry Place. Aged 72, no birth certificate, no known relatives. But in the occupation column? Security, rail line. Come on, it can't be coincidence. Historians still argue whether these were truly Sundance's final aliases or just romantic projections laid over ordinary drifters. But then, there's a letter. In 1960, a man named William T. Phillips died in Spokane, Washington. Among his belongings, police found an unpublished manuscript about a gang of train robbers. The story closely mirrored Butch and Sundance's exploits, down to the dialogue. The locations, even the wounds. The manuscript never said, Sundance Kid. But it didn't have to. And here's your quirky twist for the night. Phillips had a bullet scar on his thigh, just like the one Sundance reportedly took in Bolivia. No military record, no criminal file, just a scar, a manuscript, and a past wrapped in silence. You sit back in your chair and realize, maybe the greatest trick Sundance ever pulled wasn't vanishing? It was convincing the world he died. You visit a local diner in San Antonio where a waitress remembers an old man from the 50s, soft-spoken. Carried a .22 revolver in his boot, just in case. Paid in crisp old bills. And always tipped well. Called himself Mr. Henry. When asked about his past, he'd smile faintly and say, "That was someone else. Was it? Or was that the most honest thing he ever said?" Because Sundance Kid wasn't a man. Not anymore. He was a myth that kept walking, kept breathing, long after the newspapers closed his casket. And now you're starting to believe it. Not because of any single fact, but because of the pattern. The quiet, the vanishing, the refusal to explain. You stand outside the diner and watch a train roll by. Steel on steel, just like the ones he used to rob. And somewhere, you imagine him leaning against the counter inside, sipping black coffee, nodding along to the rhythm of wheels on tracks. Old, worn, forgotten by choice, but never gone. You're in a dusty garage on the edge of Casper, Wyoming. It's 1973. A local mechanic, retired, wrinkled, and full of stories, leans back in his creaky chair and says something that makes your skin crawl. "I used to fix the car of a fella named Harry. Moved real quiet. Knew guns like poetry. Swore he rode with Butch Cassidy once. Told me they both got out." You freeze. Another Harry. Another whisper. Another echo of Sundance. By now, you've collected enough aliases to fill a census book. Henry Long, Harry Place, Charles Allen, William Phillips, Enrique Largo, each name tied to a face just a little too familiar. And the deeper you go, the more you realize, there's a logic to the chaos. Sundance wasn't hiding randomly. He was rotating identities like saddle horses. But why? What was he running from? After Bolivia? After Etta? After Butch? You flip open a newspaper from 1921. A small, two-paragraph story about a quiet man who died in Los Angeles. Shot in a bar dispute. No family. No friends. Carrying a pocket Bible with the initials HL. Next to it, a small handwritten note clipped from an estate ledger. Deceased spoke fluent Spanish. Had surgical scar on right thigh. No next of kin. Sound familiar? Historians still argue whether Sundance faked his death once or multiple times. Like a man rebooting his life over and over. Trimming the parts that stuck out too much. Each new identity a little duller. A little quieter. Until finally, he just became nobody. That's the irony, isn't it? He was one of the sharpest shooters in the West. A man with train companies on alert. Pinkerton agents on payroll. And a bounty that reached $10. And yet, the thing he seemed to want most was stillness. You find an old trunk in an estate sale outside Missoula. Inside? A tin box of letters. Undated, unsigned, some written in Spanish, others in oddly formal English. Most addressed to no one. But one stands out. "I don't dream anymore. I miss the dust. I miss the silence after the dynamite. I miss her. But I do not miss being watched." You reread it. Once. Twice. Then you notice the stationary watermark. La Leona Ranch. Patagonia. Your chest tightens. Somewhere between the bullets and the boot prints. The robberies and the rail lines. Sundance became something no one ever expected. Sentimental. Not weak. Not broken. Just distant. Like a man who could still taste the fire but knew better than to feed it again. You chase one more lead. An elderly woman in Kansas who claims her grandfather knew Sundance. Said he met him in a hospital during World War I, both recovering from surgery. The man had a familiar limp. Told the nurses his name was Henry Place. He was reading a Spanish-language Bible and refused morphine. Said, Pain keeps the memories honest. Now here's your quirky detail of the night. One of the letters from the tin box had a crude drawing on the back. A single cactus with 3 birds flying above it. Below it, scratched into the paper with a penknife. They never caught me. You never will. You sit in silence. The sound of your own breath too loud. You realize you're not chasing a man anymore. You're chasing a reflection. A vanishing point. And maybe that's what he wanted. To be remembered by none. Doubted by all. And found by only those patient enough to read between the bullets. Because if you think about it, the outlaw didn't disappear. He diluted. A little in Montana. A little in Oregon. A little in some dusty letter. Still whispering his name. Sundance Kid didn't die in a Bolivian hut. He just stopped being seen. You're walking down Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, 1943. Neon signs flicker. Jazz spills from open doorways. The city pulses with post-war bravado. But your eyes lock on something entirely out of place. A man sitting on a bench. Dressed in plain cowboy boots and a weathered brown coat. Not costume worn. Not for show. Real. Lived in. You do a double take. He looks up. There's something in those eyes. That stillness. That absence of fear. Like a man who's already outrun every danger life can throw his way. Could it be? You follow at a distance. He moves slowly, limping. But deliberate. He passes a pawn shop. Glances inside. Then disappears into a side alley. When you peer around the corner, he's gone. Just like that. Like smoke. Welcome to the strangest theory yet. Sundance Kid didn't just survive. He lived, and made it all the way to Hollywood. You think it's absurd? Think again. There were sightings. Whispers. A man fitting his description was reportedly spotted working as a stunt coordinator for Western films in the early 40s. Never on the credits. Never in the press. But always on set. Teaching young actors how to hold a rifle like you mean it. How to stand in a saddle. How to fire from the hip without blinking. You find one old reel from 1946. An uncredited extra in a B-grade Western. In the background, a cowboy on a ridge. Barely visible. No lines. But he turns toward the camera just once. And for a half second, you swear, it's him. Historians still argue whether this Hollywood theory is based on fact or fanfare. But every few years, someone unearths another scrap. A signed paycheck to H. Long from Paramount Pictures. A makeup artist's note about that weird old cowboy who wouldn't talk. A crew photo with a man standing just far enough in the background to stay unrecognized. Then there's the peculiar case of Jackie McGraw, a former Western actress who, in a 1977 interview, mentioned a man named Harry who taught me to ride like a real outlaw. Said he'd been one once. I thought he was joking, but I never saw him smile. The interviewer didn't even follow up. But you do. You find her son. He still has an old notebook she kept. Inside, a few faded Polaroids and a scrawled note that reads, Harry taught me to reload with my eyes closed. Said he used to be somebody. I didn't ask who. And here's your quirky twist. On one page, Jackie drew a symbol, a sun with a jagged arrow beneath it. She said Harry called it his compass. You remember something? In one of the old letters found in the Montana trunk, there's the same drawing, sun and arrow, scratched into the corner. That can't be a coincidence. You begin to see the bigger picture. Sundance didn't stay hidden by burying himself. He stayed hidden by blending in. By living among the myths, until he became just another background detail. And maybe that's the real magic. Because Hollywood loves stories, but it rarely questions the ones already on film. Once he slipped behind the screen, Sundance was untouchable. You can't arrest a ghost on a film set. You can't chase a man whose face everyone has already forgotten. You imagine him now, in some rented room above a diner, polishing a Colt he hasn't fired in 20 years, listening to a radio show about the death of the outlaw era. And maybe, just maybe, chuckling to himself, because if he really was in Hollywood, he got the last laugh. You're flipping through dog-eared pages in the back of a second-hand bookstore in Laramie, Wyoming, between a battered Zane Grey novel and an out-of-print travel guide. You find something odd. It's a slim, self-published memoir. No author listed. The cover is plain brown leather, cracking at the spine. The title? I Was Almost Remembered. You freeze. Inside, the narrative is choppy, drifting between first and third person. There are no proper names. But the voice? It's Sundance, or someone channeling him perfectly. He talks about a man who once disappeared in Bolivia. A man who watched himself be declared dead in newspapers he folded quietly and left on train benches. A man who lived in 10 cities under 10 names, and still didn't feel real. The book ends with a line that punches your chest hollow. You only become a ghost if people stop looking for you. I made sure they always would. And you realize, maybe that was the plan all along. Sundance Kid never wanted to be famous. He wanted to be free. And freedom, real freedom, doesn't look like money or headlines or wanted posters. It looks like walking into a town where no one knows your face. It looks like buying coffee without someone watching how you hold your cup. It looks like disappearing, not because you're lost, but because you chose it. Historians still argue whether Sundance Kid was killed in Bolivia, buried under the wrong name, or simply outlived the people chasing him. The truth? It might not matter anymore. Because what remains is more powerful than any fact. A man who outsmarted death by making peace with invisibility. Let's drop in your quirky final detail. A highway rest stop in central Utah features a bronze plaque honoring outlaws of the American West. Below Jesse James, Billy the Kid, and Butch Cassidy is a blank space. Literally, a deliberate omission. When asked about it, the local historical society said, "That space is for the one who got away." You step outside into the late afternoon light. The wind smells like sage and distant storms. You watch tumbleweeds roll across the highway and wonder, did he ever stand right here? Was he just behind you? Once, at a diner? Was he the old man who tipped his hat and never looked back? Because here's the thing no one tells you. You never really know when you're standing next to a legend. Not until they're gone. And sometimes, not even then. Maybe that's why the legend refuses to die. Because it never truly lived in headlines, or history books, or even grave markers. It lived in the silence, in the spaces between names, in the man no one could prove was ever real, and yet who left echoes everywhere. And if you listen carefully, tonight, tomorrow, a decade from now, you might still hear him walking past you. Not running, just walking, like he's finally not afraid of being followed. You're walking through a sleepy town in eastern Montana. Not much here, just a gas station, a feed store, and a few weather-worn houses whose porches creak under the weight of old memories. But it's not the town you came for. It's a feeling, a trace. You stop at a diner on Main Street, order coffee, and ask the waitress the same question you've been asking across 5 states. Did anyone ever live here? A quiet man? Tall, lean, never talked much? Maybe went by the name Henry. Or Harry. She tilts her head, thinks, then says, could be half this town. And just like that, the trail grows cold again. Because maybe that's the point. Sundance didn't leave behind breadcrumbs. He left behind smoke, scattered sightings, conflicting documents, grave markers with no bodies. A history more full of holes than answers. You sit down in a public library and scan old death certificates. Dozens of them, men with no known relatives. Buried by the state, marked, occupation unknown. Any one of them could be him. Or none of them. Because Sundance wasn't interested in being remembered. He was interested in disappearing correctly. And now you start asking yourself, why does it matter? Why do we chase ghosts? Why do we need to know if he died in Bolivia? Or in Montana? Or in an unmarked grave under an alias no one speaks aloud? Maybe it's not about the man at all. Maybe it's about us. We crave closure. We want the story to end clean. Bang. Fade to black. But legends don't work like that. They blur. They stretch. They echo. You lean on a wooden railing near the town's edge and watch the sunset bleed across the plains. The land is quiet, timeless. And you begin to understand something unsettling and beautiful. You may have walked past him. On a street, in a store, at a bus stop. He might have tipped his hat, held the door, nodded once. And you never knew. That was his gift. Not shooting straight. Not outrunning posses. Not surviving Bolivia. But walking through history without leaving a fingerprint. Historians still argue whether that's even possible. Whether a man that famous could truly become no one. But then again, you're here, listening, and no one ever found him. So maybe that's your answer. Maybe you met him once. Maybe he smiled at you. Just a little, and you didn't realize you just shared a moment with the last living outlaw. And now he's gone again. Back into the fog. Back into legend. Back into the soft rhythm of boots against dust. So now, close your eyes for a moment. Let the creak of the saddle fade. The gunfire quiet. The railway tracks grow still. Let Sundance slip away, not with a bang, but with a breath. Let the West settle into silence again. Maybe he's still out there. In some way, not as a man, but as an idea. A whisper in the wind that sweeps across the plains. A flicker of doubt in a photograph. A stranger's smile you never thought twice about. And if you feel a sudden chill next time you're walking alone under the stars, it could just be the wind. Or it could be him. Watching, remembering, moving on. Because that's what he always did best. So let's not chase him anymore. Let's let him rest, not in the ground, but in mystery. The kind that hums in your chest long after the story ends. Take a deep breath, let it go. And if you hear footsteps in your dreams tonight, don't be afraid. It's just the Sundance Kid, passing through.